December 14th, 1911. The coldest, most hostile place on Earth. Roald Amundsen plants a flag at the bottom of the world. The first human being ever to stand at the South Pole. Minus 40 degrees. Winds that can kill a man in minutes. And he survives. Wrapped head to toe in a fabric invented by a shopkeeper from a small English town. A man who never sailed, never explored, never set foot on ice. His name was Thomas Burberry, and the cloth that kept Amundsen alive would go on to dress soldiers in the trenches of World War I and become one of the most recognizable luxury brands on the planet. It started with one stubborn obsession. How do you stay dry in the rain without being weighed down? That question built an empire. This is how. Chapter 1. The obsession of a 21-year-old. In 1856, the rules of staying dry were simple and miserable. If you wanted a waterproof coat, you wore rubberized cotton, the Macintosh. It worked, technically, but it was heavy and it didn't breathe. Wear it for an hour and you'd be soaked anyway, drowning in your own sweat. It was like walking around inside a tent. Thomas Burberry knew this problem intimately. He was a draper's apprentice in Hampshire, England. He'd spent years handling fabric, studying how different weaves behaved, watching customers complain about the same thing over and over. He was 21 when he opened his own outfitter's shop in Basingstoke. Most people that age were just trying to survive. Burberry had a vision instead. He believed clothing should protect you from Britain's brutal weather without trapping you inside it. Tough, waterproof, and breathable. At the time, those three words did not belong in the same sentence. Everyone said it couldn't be done. So Burberry got obsessed. He noticed something clever watching shepherds in the countryside. Their linen smocks, coated in lanolin, the natural grease from sheep's wool, repelled water but still let air through. The shepherds stayed dry in conditions that left everyone else miserable. That was the spark. What if you could waterproof the thread itself before weaving it into cloth? It took him 23 years. Years of experiments. Failed batches. Weaving, testing, starting over. While he built his shop into a real business, the obsession never let go. Then, in 1879, he cracked it. He developed a process using long staple Egyptian cotton, where each individual yarn was waterproofed first, then woven into an incredibly tight twill. The result shrugged off rain, survived hard use, and still let the body breathe. He called it Gabardine. It was so revolutionary he patented it in 1888. For the first time in history, you could stay dry without being buried under heavy rubber. Burberry hadn't just made a better coat, he'd made the old way obsolete. But a fabric is just a fabric until the world sees what it can do. And Burberry was about to get the most extreme product test imaginable. Chapter 2. The Proving Ground. Here's what separated Thomas Burberry from every other clothing maker of his era. He understood something most people wouldn't grasp for another century. You don't sell a product, you sell proof. And there was no better proof on Earth than survival in places that killed people. At the turn of the century, the world was gripped by the heroic age of exploration. Men were racing to the most lethal corners of the planet, and the public was obsessed. Burberry saw his opportunity. If his fabric could keep a man alive at the poles, no salesman on Earth could argue with it. So he outfitted the explorers. In 1911, Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen chose Burberry Gabardine for his assault on the South Pole. His clothing, his tents, all of it woven from the cloth Burberry had spent decades perfecting. Amundsen won the race, became the first human to reach the South Pole, and came home alive, wearing Burberry. A month later, British explorer Robert Falcon Scott reached the pole too, also equipped with Burberry Gabardine and a Burberry tent. Scott's story ended in tragedy. He and his men died on the return journey, but the Gabardine had done its job in the harshest laboratory imaginable. Then came Sir Ernest Shackleton, who wore Burberry Gabardine across multiple Antarctic expeditions, including the legendary Endurance voyage. When his ship was crushed by ice and his men were stranded for months, the Gabardine held. While other companies ran advertisements claiming their coats were durable, Burberry could simply point to the South Pole. The proof was unarguable, tested at the edge of human endurance, and it passed. Gabardine wasn't just a fabric anymore, it was a legend. and the public wanted a piece of it. But the real transformation, the moment Burberry went from successful to immortal, was about to be forged in something far darker than ice. Chapter 3: Born in the Trenches. Long before the World Wars, the British military had already noticed Burberry. During the Boer War, fought in South Africa from 1899 to 1902, British officers had unofficially adopted Burberry's lightweight waterproof coats. They were simply better than the heavy wool greatcoats everyone else was issued. Halfway through that conflict, Burberry became an official outfitter to the British Army. Around 1912, Burberry patented a coat called the T-locken. The name came from how it closed, a single strap and buckle that, when tied, locked you in. Knee length, double-breasted, broad collar, it was in every meaningful way the trench coat before it had that name. Then came 1914 and the First World War. The British War Office commissioned Burberry to adapt its officer's coat for the nightmare of trench warfare, and Burberry engineered it for the battlefield with chilling precision. They added epaulettes on the shoulders so officers could display rank and hook their whistles and gloves. They added D-rings to the belt for attaching equipment like map cases and, grimly, grenades. A storm flap across the chest. A caped back to throw off the rain. Raglan sleeves for free movement. They wove it in khaki instead of the traditional beige, so it would blend into the mud and smoke. The soldiers who lived in the waterlogged trenches of Europe gave the coat the name that stuck forever: the trench coat. It became standard officer issue. Reserved for officers only, in fact. Enlisted men weren't permitted to wear them, and so the trench coat became more than weatherproofing. It became a symbol of authority, of leadership, of a certain bearing under fire. Hundreds of thousands of officers wore it through the bloodiest war the world had ever seen, and the ones who came home didn't take it off. They kept wearing it on the streets of London because it looked sharp and it worked. A coat designed for slaughter quietly became a fashion icon. That template, the epaulettes, the D-rings, the storm flap, the belt, has remained essentially unchanged for over a century. The trench coat you can buy today is the same coat that climbed out of the trenches in 1918. And the knight in Burberry's logo carries one Latin word on its banner: prorsum, forwards. Thomas Burberry died in 1926 at the age of 90. He was never a sailor, never an explorer, never a soldier. He was a shopkeeper who got fixated on one small, ordinary problem and refused to let it go for over 2 decades. But here's what makes his story matter. Burberry understood that genuine innovation doesn't sell itself with words. It sells itself with proof. He didn't tell people his fabric was tough. He sent it to the South Pole and let the survivors do the talking. He didn't claim it was practical. He let it earn its name in the worst trenches of human history. He turned a fabric into a legend by putting it exactly where failure meant death, and watching it refused to fail. Today, Burberry is a global luxury house worth billions. That iconic check, those trench coats on every runway, all of it traces back to a 21-year-old who looked at a wet, miserable raincoat and thought, there has to be a better way. It took him 23 years to find it, and it conquered the coldest place on Earth. If you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the untold stories behind the brands you see every day. And tell me in the comments, which iconic brand should we uncover next? Drop your suggestion below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.